Welcome back to another episode of the History of Fan Anime. I'm your host, Chow. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about our favorite video games across different consoles and any special memories that we have about these different consoles when we owned them. And again, this started from a conversation I had at work, and we just started talking about how we grew up with video games and what video games were really significant to us over all the different consoles that we had. So I'm going to go through my sort of history of video games and consoles and that kind of stuff, and some stories about them, and and then basically, if you like, you can put your stories about these various different games. Do you agree with some of the games that are on the list? Do you also have a similar story? Put that in the comments below, and that'd be great. Before we begin, don't forget to go down below, click and click subscribe. But about 60% of you are already subscribed, and I really appreciate that. And again, hopefully the rest of you, I hope I've earned your subscription, and you go hit that red button, subscribe, and also maybe click that notification bell, because obviously YouTube is starting to get better on recommending my videos now. But for the mass majority, you won't know when I release videos until you get that notification ring. All right. I'm going to pull up the list of popular video games, and I'm going to sort of go through them, as well as add my own stories and my own games as well. So you do that in the comments below for that too. All right. So without further delay, let's begin. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with more significant titles on the PlayStation system. Now, I've already done part 1, which introduces a lot of the games that we sort of were introduced with the PlayStation when the first system came out. And then some of the games were not as good as some of the ones that came later on, obviously, because they with the developers kit finally out there, people finally started making some better games and make better use of the system and that kind of stuff based on what was available, right? So the first of these newer games that came out that really seemed to be really serious was the entire first move around as first person type of games, and the ones that really stuck out really well to me were Metal Gear Solid and Resident Evil. Okay, again, that entire line of with the entire storyline with not including Resident Evil, but also things like Time Crisis and that kind of stuff. I remember I picked up a pair of the gun consoles, right, and gun cons that was needed for it, to play that game, and we spent like hours just going over each of those different missions and trying to do things for in terms of trying to complete the mission with stealth and whatnot. But this is sort of a new era of I guess the really beginnings of those really broad storylines with with interactive gameplay to build the story. Okay, and again, this will go on with the Xbox and all that stuff when they get other stories and that kind of stuff, and more detailed stories. But I think these were sort of the first ones that sort of really hit it off for the PlayStation console. Now, I'm not saying that those are the only ones. The entire Final Fantasy set when that first came out, Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8, it was really, really big. And I think that was sort of the first era of when they started actually trying to put full motion video and that kind of stuff, and render it all, and then put that as the opening sequences and that kind of stuff, and video sequences within the game. I think that's the first when they started doing all that kind of stuff. And again, I mean, they could have picked some of the earlier Final Fantasies, but I think at the time, everyone was expecting a new Final Fantasy, and I think when they finally released those in terms of PlayStation, I think a lot of people were really excited to see what the PlayStation was capable of at that time. And again, at this time, some of the biggest names were all brought together to make Final Fantasy. So I think that's also another part of it is the fact that some of the best people in terms of music and graphics and that kind of stuff and storytelling are all kind of building these monster games. Okay, and the next category that I thought that was really significant was that there is a big shift in the actual fighting games type of genre. Okay, and I know that from the Super Nintendo, Street Fighter 2 was really big. So again, a lot of people when the PlayStation came out, they were waiting for the next sort of port from the arcade to an actual console. Obviously, so a lot of people were waiting for Street Fighter 3 Alpha and all that kind of stuff to come out under the system. So that was really well waited for. But not only that, there's all these other ones which are capitalizing on trying to make 3D fighting kind of going on, right? Being able to to spin around the person and to move within different levels around that person. Okay, that's a little different than what normal Street Fighter would be, but and what I mean by that is that with the ability to move on. Of course, again, we began with Toshinden, but as time went on, the franchises like Tekken and the Dead or Alive franchise really grew. Again, really graphical, detailed, motion sequences for the openings and the endings of the different characters and that kind of stuff. Very loose storylines, to sort of tie the characters together, just like Street Fighter. They try to tie the characters together and build on this kind of thing. In many ways, I wish that they actually made more of all of this entire franchise with those. But it's just even things like Toshinden and Street Fighter, they've only made just very few type of things at this particular time in animes and that kind of stuff to actually build on a story or to put them all together more so than most other fighting games and that kind of stuff, right? I think the best sort of example in this sort of situation it would be the whole entire King of Fighters franchise, and you can probably include the Fatal Fury and the Art of Fighting sort of arcs into that as well. But the fact that they've got and again another rich amount of characters, but they said they're the only people who actually really went out to later on make anime and that kind of stuff that builds that story and builds the connections between all the various different characters rather than just being individual fighting characters in a game, right? But definitely, we spent a lot of time playing these new fighting games, such as, like I said, Tekken and Dead or Alive. The other thing I'll also mention is that at about this time, since they were worried about trying to properly map out the characters' motions and that kind of stuff, an incredible amount of time and effort was spent on breast physics. And I know that especially Dead or Alive, they had all these different settings and that kind of stuff for the game, and and you can try to sort of modify that and try to see how much of it was. And apparently some copious amount of money was spent on modeling and that kind of stuff for that. I wonder how that has been spent, but that was one of the big things that was the one of the pivotal things for this particular type of game franchise. Okay, and the last sort of category that I want to go touch on for the PlayStation 1 series is the whole entire sort of driving kind of games and that kind of stuff. And there's two main, two sort of classes, obviously. When they first released the PlayStation, they came out with Ridge Racer as the first sort of sort of game for that. And sure, that's a driving game that wasn't really that bad. I mean those kind of driving games are pretty much the same anyway. But for the really big one for the system became Gran Turismo. And I remember they spent a lot of time trying to get all the different car manufacturers and that kind of stuff to be represented in the game. And for one reason or another, some car brands and that kind of stuff, just didn't want to be participating in it. I don't know if they just were just holding them for real money, or they wanted to try to make their own, or I don't know what their what the motive was for not adding their particular models of cars in them. But it's just at the beginning it just seemed to be a big sort of I don't know. I wouldn't say Pokemon like the experience where they just had to try to get them all, but that was a really big push for for that system and that company to be able to try to get as many of the cars out there as it was possible. And it was it was kind of fun to try to do some of the older types of cars and different types of vehicles that you could do in that. But instead, they didn't bother trying to pursue that method, and they obviously went on to different courses and basically try to improve the accuracy in terms of lines and whatnot with the particular game. And again, improving on the graphics and the sound effects and that kind of stuff. The coordination of that. It was very good. Again, I'm not a big fan of these type of driving games, but I recognize that it was really this is a really a significant change in in video games and that kind of stuff. To put this much detail in vehicle motion and the graphics, changing of the courses and that kind of stuff, which I thought was very, very interesting. The other game that in this sort of category that I thought was really significant was Grand Theft Auto. I remember, when the first one came out, I thought it was, kind of it was new because it was, the novelty of that particular thing. It's just the abilities, and just the ability to do just about anything you wanted to on the map, right? There's no sort of linear progression, right? So it wasn't forcing you to go in a particular order or particular type of story, but you could you were free to do what you wanted to do, kind of, and go from either completing the quest or actually trying to just spend time goofing around. And I think that freedom was really good because it really allowed you to do just like some pretty stupid things, like admittedly speaking, right? Just like I remember just trying to test the game's ability, to push the game to its sort of limits to see if you could walk off the edge of the map, or sort of thing, or see if you could actually do strange stunts. For example, I remember one of the stunts I remember Rob was doing was that we were playing the game and we decided to jack the fire engine, right? And then we decided, okay, we're going to drive the fire engine into the subway system. So in this one, there's a set of stairs that goes down into the subway system. So you had to really, it was really tough to try to fit the fire engine down these staircases and that kind of stuff. But anyway, we got down there onto the subway platform, lined it up and got it onto the subway tracks. And then as soon as we got it onto the tracks, then we decided to just floor it down the tracks, and then basically go as fast as we could through the subway rails and that kind of stuff until we finally met up with the train and hit it head on, and sure, that's probably that was game over for that one. But I mean, it was certainly funny to see that you could actually try to do that, right? So just one thing like that. I remember the other ones that we were trying to do were things like to see how long, because I remember they kept escalating. If you got in trouble with the police or whatever, they kept on trying to escalate it, and then they kept on sending all these guys after you, right? And then they finally send the army guys after you and whatnot. So I remember we were trying to think of ways on how to how to outlast and to to basically live as long as you can before they finally got to you, type of thing. Um, so I remember one of the things that we did was there was a parking lot in the middle of the things. It was like it was like a multi-level parking lot. But the neat thing is that um, you know if you stood in certain places within the parking lot, you were technically safe. So I remember what it is. There's one main entrance and slash exit into the parking lot. So I remember, you would spend a whole bunch of time, getting a bunch of cars and whatnot, and moving them all to the entrance of the parking lot, and basically blocking it off. So you just take there, you park it there, you totally barricade and block up this parking lot. And then so what you ended up doing is that once you get the parking lot blocked up, like I think it was like 3 or 4 cars deep, all blocked up at the front. Okay, so that was useful because then that prevents the SWAT cars and stuff from driving in and breaking into the entrance, the only entrance of the parking lot. Right, it was this entrance. So that was fully blocked up, and then so you didn't have to worry about them trying to get in through there. Then what you could do is you could creep up to the second level, and then you can use your sniper to pick off people, and of course that escalates it more, and then the helicopter starts coming and trying to shoot you. But all you have to do is you basically just have to kind of duck inwards, and because of the angle of fire and that kind of stuff, they can't get in, right? So you could basically run, do the siege type thing, right? So where you can run in one spot, peek out of the second floor of the parking lot, pick off a bunch of people, run back in, and then basically poke your head out in a different direction, and then just playing a game like that, and once we figured that out, we finally broke the record of outlasting a minute or two out in the open to being able to sit there for half an hour or 45 minutes plus, trying to get as many guys as you can, and again, just little goofy things and little stunts like that you can do in the game. Is what was really kind of cool about Gran Turismo. So yeah, we spent a lot of time playing that game. That's for sure. Because I remember, when I was running my store, a lot of people just we'd set up the game, be in the day, run the game like 6 hours, 8 hours, a day, and for probably like a good month, 2 months, it was like every day was like that. So, and that was a really big period in the sort of open architecture type of games. Hope you had kind of fun and a little blast in the past. And don't forget, I'll be doing more kind of episodes where I bring out some pictures and more merchandise and collectible stuff from that past era. Okay, so until next time, see you again.